Who are a few people you wouldn't think they'd do a crime? Let's find out, starting with number 5, the minister. Jeanette McCraney from Dothan, Alabama, went from living what she described as the American dream with her family to living in the nightmare reality of her husband's arrest. Coley McCraney, a preacher and truck driver, was convicted of ending the lives of 2 teenagers back in 1999. Jeanette McCraney fondly recalled her family's life in early 2019. They were active churchgoers, with her husband leading a congregation while also working as a truck driver. Their 2 children grew up seeing their parents doing what seemed to be the right thing. However, this facade of a perfect family life crumbled on March 15, 2019, when Coley McCraney was arrested. On July 31st, 1999, J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hollett, both 17, set off to celebrate Beasley's birthday. They got lost while heading to a party and ended up at a gas station in Ozark, Alabama. Tracy called her mother to let her know they had received directions and were heading home. Tragically, they never made it back. The next morning, the police found Beasley's car on the side of the road, less than a mile from the gas station. Inside the trunk, the bodies of the 2 girls were discovered. For nearly 2 decades, the case remained unsolved, with few clues and no solid leads. Ozark Police Chief Marlos Walker, inspired by the 2018 arrest of Joseph James D'Angelo for a spree of horrific crimes he committed in the 70s and 80s, decided to use forensic genetic genealogy to solve the mystery. DNA from the crime scene was sent to a lab in Virginia, and 5 months later, a match was found. Coley McCraney, a name familiar to Chief Walker from high school, emerged as a suspect. McCraney voluntarily provided a DNA sample, which matched the DNA found on Beasley. On March 15, 2019, McCraney was arrested and charged. He had never been a suspect before this breakthrough. During the trial, McCraney claimed he had supposedly consensual intimate relations with Beasley, but denied any involvement in their tragic passing. Despite his defense, the jury found him guilty of all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison, bringing some sense of closure to the families of Beasley and Hollett. The verdict was a significant moment for the victims' families, who had waited over 2 decades for justice. But despite his conviction, McCraney continues to maintain his innocence and has filed an appeal, hoping for a new trial. At the time of this video, the appeal is ongoing. The case is both terrible and sad, and you'd never expect a minister to be guilty of these types of atrocities. Number 4, the Bookkeeper. Maree Wilson, a 69-year-old grandmother, was sentenced to at least 3 years in prison for embezzling $4 million from Stosius Constructions. As their bookkeeper, she diverted funds to her own accounts over several years. Wilson used the stolen money to feed her gambling problem, dropping at least $500 daily and indulging in luxury overseas holidays and shopping sprees. Wilson's scheme began to unravel in November of 2021 when her suspicious transactions were flagged. She confessed to the company's director and his son, expressing relief that the ordeal was over. She admitted that her initial motive was just to support her gambling habit, but that quickly spiraled into an indefensible multi-million-dollar hole. Wilson acknowledged what she did, but said she didn't really give it much thought at the time, which is pretty obvious. The court heard that she occasionally gave some of the stolen money to her children or charity and spent at least $50,000 gambling on various cruises. Despite intending to confess multiple times, Wilson always backed out, instead implying that the company's owner should have been more vigilant with the finances. Her fraudulent activities, conducted over 14 years, left the owner believing the company's losses were due to his own inability to run the company, and the betrayal almost ruined the family-run business and strained family relationships. Wilson forfeited her $15,000 severance payment, she was probably forced to, and she's made no effort to repay the stolen money, and her actions left the company on the brink of collapse. It's absurd that she somehow thinks it makes sense to blame the victim for not being vigilant enough with the finances, since that was the job he was paying her to do. She probably didn't really believe that, but why even say it? As if the guy was gonna go, you know, you're right, it's my fault you stole $4 million, so we'll drop the charges. She already got 3 years, she might as well just own it. However, she does have a point in that when it comes to your finances, you should always keep an eye on them. No matter how much you trust the person you put in charge. When a business is failing, it seems like it's always the bookkeeper's fault. They're the butlers of white-collar crime. Number 3, the unassuming grandmother. Susan Goose, a 63-year-old con artist from Norfolk in the UK, orchestrated a series of scams that led to her getting 6 years in prison. Over several years, she swindled 7 victims out of $550,000. Her method involved approaching victims in pubs around Norfolk, claiming she needed funds for legal fees related to a supposed inheritance case. Goose even fabricated documents and emails to make her story believable. One of her most notable victims was Jennifer Essler, another grandmother. Goose manipulated Essler into bankrolling a phony legal battle over an inheritance from a wealthy man who had supposedly mistreated Goose's late daughter, Chloe. Chloe was a real person, but had tragically passed away in a car accident back in 2006, and there's no evidence she was ever mistreated. Goose's manipulation went on for 8 years, causing Essler to lose her home, business, and husband. The emotional toll was immense, leading to Essler suffering a mini-stroke from the stress of losing her home and livelihood. Essler's son, Daniel Lingwood, detailed how Goose exploited his mother, resulting in significant financial and emotional harm. Goose made her victims truly believe there was a growing inheritance and a legal battle with the family backing up her claims with all of her phony paperwork. Jennifer Essler eventually lost her home due to the significant debt incurred from lending money to Goose, which prompted further investigation and ultimately led to Goose's arrest. A search of Goose's home revealed no evidence that there was any legal case. Instead, investigators found over 2,600 payments to online gambling sites totaling more than $160,000. At Norwich Crown Court, Goose pleaded guilty to 5 counts of fraud by false representation covering offenses dating back to 2011. She also asked for 2 additional fraud offenses to be considered, seemingly as some way to take responsibility or as an act of contrition. But despite her admissions, Goose showed virtually no remorse for her actions during her trial, making the confessions feel more strategic than sincere. It's pretty low to exploit your deceased daughter's memory by scamming in her name and spinning the type of tale she did. You wouldn't expect that, which is why she's on this list. We probably would have believed her too. Number 2, the judge. Brian Lovell, a judge from Oklahoma, got himself all tangled up in a series of criminal charges. Lovell was indicted for allegedly doing a drive-by towards his brother-in-law's home in Bison, Oklahoma. This incident added to his existing legal troubles, which included multiple charges in Texas. Brian Lovell, a judge from Oklahoma, faced new felony charges for discharging his gat into a dwelling and using a vehicle to facilitate the discharge of said gat. These charges stemmed from an incident in Bison, Oklahoma, where he allegedly made his gat go rat-a-tat-tat at his brother-in-law Kenneth Mark's home. Just 2 days after this event, Lovell claimed that his gat had been stolen out of his vehicle. This wasn't Lovell's first encounter with legal issues involving firearms. He was also facing 8 felony counts in Texas for a similar incident in Austin. In that case, Lovell allegedly used the same gat he used to fire at his brother-in-law's house to fire approximately 5 shots from his white SUV for some reason, hitting several vehicles in the process. Additionally, during another road rage incident, he was accused of rear-ending a vehicle and attempting to push it onto oncoming traffic. Lovell was indicted for the Austin incident and released on a $10,000 bond, which is really weird and obvious that someone was doing him a favor. His legal troubles continued to mount with the new charges in Oklahoma. Despite these serious allegations, Lovell's lawyer, Stephen Jones, asserted that the evidence against his client was insufficient. Jones emphasized that they hadn't yet received all discovery materials and that the judge and his wife had fully cooperated with the investigation. The case against Lovell painted a picture of a judge who seemed to repeatedly find himself on the wrong side of the law. His actions, both in Oklahoma and Texas, raised serious questions about his character and judgment. At the time of this video, the case is still ongoing. It's pretty weird to hear stories about this type of behavior from a judge of all people. The stereotype about bad judges is that they're usually corrupt or something, right? They're not known for doing poorly executed drive-bys or trying to push other motorists into oncoming traffic. Hopefully, B-Money Lovell settles down before he really does hurt someone. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay right here to find out how these people really made their money. Number 1, the Judge 2. Mark Grisanti, a 59-year-old judge from upstate New York, got into serious trouble over a neighborhood parking dispute. Caught on video, Grisanti was seen shoving a cop during a wild, shirtless brawl with his neighbors, Ronnie Dobbs style. This all went down one evening when Grisanti came home to find his neighbors, Joseph and Gina McCraney, blocking his driveway with their cars. Understandably frustrated, Grisanti called 911 and then confronted the melees with his wife Maria. The situation quickly escalated into a shouting match, with Grisanti threatening the melees and yelling profanities. The neighbors fired back, and soon, a full-blown fight broke out. When the police arrived, they tried to separate the fighting neighbors. Things got more heated when Maria, who's a petite woman, resisted arrest and was taken to the ground by the officers. Seeing this, Grisanti flipped out and pushed the arresting officer and shouted threats. In the end, both Grisanti and his wife were handcuffed, but no charges were filed against any of the parties involved. The New York State Commission on Judicial Conduct, known as the SCJC, decided to formally reprimand Grisanti for his behavior. While some members of the commission voted to remove him from the bench, others opted for a lighter punishment. The SCJC noted that Grisanti was close to being ousted and urged him to reflect on his actions. Grisanti, who was a Court of Claims judge and acting Erie County Supreme Court justice, had been serving since 2015 and continued in a holdover capacity after his term expired. Adding to Grisanti's legal issues, the SCJC found that Grisanti had a conflict of interest in 8 cases involving an attorney who had bought Grisanti's law firm. The judge continued to receive payments from this lawyer, but failed to disclose their financial relationship, which was another point against him in the SCJC's findings. Grisanti had 30 days to request a review of the SCJC's decision by the New York Court of Appeals. If he didn't, the public admonishment would stand, and of course, he wasn't going to challenge it, so it did. His neighbor, Gina McCraney, expressed her disappointment with the decision, feeling that justice wasn't served. She and her husband believed they were victims in the situation. They felt that the SCJC's decision undermined their faith in the judicial system. Grisanti's lawyers, however, defended his actions, explaining that the judge's overall record was exemplary and that his conduct during this one incident shouldn't overshadow his career. They highlighted that testimony from various professionals supported the view that Grisanti was a diligent and hard-working judge. What do you think, though? This judge basically had someone tell everyone that he was bad, and that was going to be his punishment, which basically means there was no punishment. Should Grisanti have been removed from the bench, or was the punishment fitting? Who are some of the fakest people out there who misrepresent exactly who they are? Today's entry about George Santos was suggested by Winged Unicorn 500. If you would ever like us to cover anyone or a specific topic, you can either email us at pablitosway2016@gmail.com or leave a comment within 24 hours of the release of our latest video. Let's get started with number 6, the creepy party crasher. Notorious New York party crasher Priantha De Silva gained entry to high society events through imaginative frauds and pretending to be someone he was not. De Silva infiltrated events by posing as an affluent man about town, a high-powered editor, and an influential movie producer. He would attend events in Manhattan and tell people he was a producer for Oscar-winning movies like Slumdog Millionaire and Crash. De Silva attended many high-profile events like the movie premieres of Stockholm and Jonathan, and parties for The Tourist and Blue Valentine. When De Silva attended Polaroid's 80th anniversary bash, he spent his evening pretending to be an Oscar-winning producer and creeping out a group of young fashionistas, which seems to be a regular thing for him. He bragged about writing for Lady Gaga and claimed he won several Oscars for Best Picture. But De Silva had a secret. He was broke and went to extreme measures to hide it. In 2010, De Silva talked his way into a charity dinner put on by the young philanthropists of the Cancer Research Institute by acting shocked he wasn't on the guest list. De Silva claimed his check must have gotten lost in the mail and gave his credit card number instead. There was a silent auction at the event where De Silva purchased a $1,500 Prada bag, which he also charged to the credit card number he provided at the door. When the event staff ran the card number he provided later, it declined, and it turned out he had used a fake Bank of America credit card. De Silva was arrested over the incident and pleaded guilty to 4th-degree grand larceny, resulting in a 2.5 to a 3-year prison sentence. Apparently, he was upset that being locked up meant he would miss fashion. After completing his sentence, De Silva was released from prison and back to his old ways. In May 2013, he deposited 5 credit card convenience checks into someone else's account, then withdrew roughly $15,000 that didn't belong to him. A few months later, he deposited a check for $19,985, which was supposedly issued and signed by Contessa Garzadori, into his Citibank account. The NYPD was notified when he attempted to withdraw $12,500 the following day. Police went through De Silva's bag, where they found a bank statement and a check belonging to Garzadori, the driver's license of Justin Adams, and other documents belonging to various people. Officers arrested De Silva, and he was again charged with grand larceny. He pleaded guilty to the grand larceny charge and criminal possession of a forged instrument. This time his sentence was 30 months to 5 years. De Silva did his time, but refused to learn his lesson. Well, he is consistent. De Silva deposited $4,275 in checks made out to him from Artisan Russian Dumpling LLC, the legal name for Dial Dumplings, an Upper West Side shop. He used another fake check from Artisan Russian Dumpling LLC to buy a ticket to the Tribeca Film Festival. De Silva emailed the film festival to purchase VIP tickets, but the check bounced. In 2018, he was arrested again, and this time charged with stealing property from the film festival. Officers found him at a homeless shelter where he had been living the whole time. De Silva is now serving 2 to 4 years at a facility in upstate New York. If he tries to float some of his lies in prison, he could be in for some real trouble. Number 5. Actual cultural misappropriation. Kay LeClaire, a Wisconsin-based artist, shared their intricate bead and basket work on social media and Etsy. LeClaire, identified as non-binary and Native American, building a following over 2 years with their artwork. That was until the actual creators of the work came forward to take ownership of the pieces and accused LeClaire of taking credit for other people's crafts and stories. In their posts, LeClaire claimed they took inspiration from visions and dreams. LeClaire claimed multiple identities, including two-spirit, which is a term Indigenous people often use to describe a person with non-binary gender identity. Additionally, LeClaire claimed multiple ethnic identities, including Native American, Métis, Oneida, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Cuban, and Jewish. She was actually none of these. But not even being a little bit Indigenous didn't stop LeClaire from pretending, though, as they campaigned for civil rights for Indigenous people and would write academic papers and speak at conferences to raise awareness about Indigenous issues. One of the articles they wrote was about a white-owned music venue opening in Madison called Winnebago, the name for a local tribe, which Indigenous people saw as a slur. LeClaire created artwork, and by created, we mean stealing. And when discussing their inspiration, LeClaire would either make up stories or steal other people's stories. LeClaire also claimed to have worked on tanning animal hides. They hadn't. LeClaire contacted John Greendeer, the health and wellness coordinator at the Ho-Chunk Nation, to see if he had any scraps of hide to use on an art project. Greendeer was quickly suspicious of LeClaire and suspected they were lying about their abilities and history. But because of the warm and welcoming nature of the tribe, very few even questioned LeClaire, simply accepting what they said at face value. LeClaire took an active role in the Native American community and became deeply ingrained. They co-founded a queer Indigenous artists collective, the Guige Collective, where they spoke about issues of importance to the tribal communities in the state. LeClaire was even appointed to serve on Wisconsin's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Task Force. LeClaire was named the first community leader in residence at the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Ecology, which paid $4,800 for the role. Nipinet Lansom, the co-founder of Guige Collective, noticed LeClaire would frequently not show up for work. The opinion of the collective was that LeClaire was financially draining them, as they were paying LeClaire $750 a week to not show up. Some community members were suspicious of LeClaire's Indigenous claims, but tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Even before the truth of LeClaire's identity came to light, executives at the Guige Collective planned to remove LeClaire as an owner. Lansom always had suspicions about LeClaire, who would ask her to take them to the tanning salon, as LeClaire claimed to have a vitamin D deficiency. LeClaire also always carried a bottle of spray tan, which is really weird the more you think about it. How was that even explained? LeClaire also frequently made inaccurate statements about Métis culture, which Lansom system noticed and found strange. She found some old photos on LeClaire's social media pages where LeClaire had fair skin and light hair. However, as colonialism left many indigenous people disconnected from their cultures, Lansom assumed LeClaire struggled to define their indigenous ancestry. Advanced Smythe, a hobbyist genealogist, decided to do more digging into LeClaire's background. He learned of them through a Facebook ad for an upcoming talk they were giving about indigenous feminism. As it turns out, Advanced Smythe had some talking to do as well. Advanced Smythe had noticed inconsistencies in LeClaire's stories, such as their native name, a name typically used in ceremonies or with other people in the community. Through his investigations, he found that LeClaire was a common Native American last name, but they claimed to be Anishinaabe in social media posts. He discovered through LeClaire's social media that they had claimed to be Cuban in the past, and in a Facebook post from 2017, they identified as white. The genealogist then traced LeClaire's true lineage, which was German, Swedish, French-Canadian. Advanced Smythe ultimately revealed LeClaire's true identity. They went by Katie LeClaire in 2012 and graduated from Hamilton High School in Sussex, Wisconsin. LeClaire married their high school alum Adam Pagenkopf in the summer of 2018. People immediately believed Advanced Smythe's findings, having dealt with inconsistencies in LeClaire's stories for years. The Guiche Collective removed LeClaire from ownership and contacted a lawyer to handle further conversations with them. They publicly stated how LeClaire's actions hurt the organization and its members from a personal, professional, and financial standpoint. LeClaire issued a half-hearted apology where they acknowledged their actions and promised to return any culturally related items in their possession to the community. Their apology wasn't well received, as the indigenous community felt she had done too much damage to reconcile. What's the indigenous name for phony baloney? Number 4. The Wine-trepreneur. Former Shark Tank entrepreneur Joseph Falcone raised almost $2 million intended for his business, but put the money towards personal expenses instead. The $2 million Falcone raised from investors should have put his business in an excellent position to grow, but he had a different plan for the money. He used over $500,000 to pay his personal bills, such as the mortgage on his Florida home, and to fund his online securities trading. Falcone appeared on Shark Tank to present his wine in a cup idea, which was a single serving of wine in a sealed glass. After the successful pitch, he established 3G's Vino LLC in 2012. It was a wine and liquor distribution business based in Bethpage and Farmingdale, New York. After being featured on Shark Tank, Falcone used the TV cameo to persuade investors to put more money into the product. Between September 2014 and November 2015, he persuaded investors to hand over $1.8 million to produce the single-serving wine product. He then decided he had better ways to spend that money. The company that made the product, Copa di Vino, had no involvement in Falcone's scheme. Their founder, James Martin, clarified that Falcone didn't pitch Copa di Vino on Shark Tank and had never been an investor in the product. Copa di Vino was strictly a 3G's Vino LLC distributor and severed ties with the distribution company and Falcone in 2016. Falcone's pretending to be an entrepreneur and winemaker failed. He pleaded guilty to wire fraud and was sentenced to 24 months in prison. The judge also ordered that he pay $1.8 million in restitution to 7 of the investors he deceived. That'll be something to whine about. Number 3. School dinner scam. Alozer Porges and Joel Lowy ran the Central United Talmudical Academy, but this duo proved that not all individuals in power are as holy as they seem. Porges and Lowy were the former leaders of a Brooklyn school that was supposed to be serving federally subsidized suppers 5 nights a week to low-income and at-risk children. Many children already received federally funded breakfasts, lunches, and snacks at school. However, school was dismissed at 4:45, and the children went home without supper. Porges and Lowy lied in documents claiming schools served these children dinner. They dramatically inflated the number of meals the schools provided to receive larger reimbursements from the federal government's child and adult food program designated for at-risk and vulnerable children. Porges and Lowy then used the funds to throw social events for adults, bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs in a nearby banquet hall. Their expenditures included $800,000 on just chicken, not even Popeye's chicken, which would make some sense, but regular chicken. The FBI discovered the school had carried out multiple frauds to cheat the government, including diverting over $3 million allocated for school children's meals, other uses. The school admitted to defrauding the government, and Lowy and Porges pleaded guilty to fraud charges. The Central United Talmudical Academy received over $3.2 million in federal meal reimbursement programs in 2014 and 2015. Investigators realized the program never existed, and the school was putting the money to other uses. But that wasn't the school's only scheme to defraud the government of millions of dollars. The school also manipulated its payroll able to hide employee income by paying workers in cash and coupons for local stores. Additionally, the school contrived tax exemptions, received technology funding unrelated to education, provided childcare without licenses, and engaged in other fraudulent activities. Porges received a 2-year prison sentence and a fine of $150,000. His attorneys argued he should only receive community service rather than prison time, as he had to care for his family. A fair point. However, prosecutors revealed that Porges left his wife with their 11 children and gave her a meager $250 per week allowance, prompting her to apply for food stamps. Number 2. George Santos. Richard Osthoff is a disabled veteran whose dog needed surgery when Long Island Republican George Santos offered to help raise funds for the operation. The seemingly selfless act should have saved Osthoff's dog's life. Instead, the money just disappeared. Osthoff was living in a tent in an abandoned chicken coop in Howell, New Jersey, with his service dog Sapphire. In May 2016, Sapphire developed a life-threatening stomach tumor which Osthoff couldn't afford to treat. After the devastating diagnosis, a veterinary technician told Osthoff about the charity Friends of Pets United and Anthony DeVolder, a man who could help. George Santos used the name Anthony DeVolder as an alias when he first entered politics. At first, Santos appeared touched by Osthoff's story and wanted to help. He raised $3,000 on social media using a GoFundMe page. Then, the page was unexpectedly shut down. Without the $3,000, Osthoff had no way to get Sapphire the treatment she needed. When retired Police Sergeant Michael Bowl heard what happened, he intervened in an attempt to get the money back. Sapphire's condition worsened. Osthoff couldn't even pay for the dog's euthanasia and cremation, having been out of work for over a year with a broken leg and had a panhandle to raise the money. Bowl confronted Santos and demanded he give Osthoff the cash or use it to get Osthoff another service dog. Santos was uncooperative on the phone and claimed he would use the money to help other animals instead. The politician added that Osthoff didn't do things the way he wanted and that Sapphire was not a candidate for surgery, meaning the funds should go to another animal in need. Bowl pointed out that the money was specially raised for Osthoff and his service dog, but Santos wouldn't budge. Sapphire was also supposed to be the beneficiary of a 2017 fundraising event in which Santos charged $50 a person, but Osthoff never received a dime. When Santos was asked about Osthoff's claims, he denied ever even knowing the veteran. Osthoff did a TV interview where he called Santos out for being a fraud and keeping the donations raised for him and Sapphire. The attention Osthoff's situation raised meant that people were looking deeper into Santos's charity, with him facing allegations of not just stealing the $3,000, but also running a fake charity. His colleagues in the New York State Assembly and Senate and local Democratic organizations have called for his resignation. Also, both the New York State Democratic Committee and the Nassau County Democratic Committee called for an investigation into his behavior. Sapphire passed away on January 15, 2017. George Santos is somehow still in office. Number 1. What kind of a dealer? Australian jewelry designer Gene Wimmer once lived an extravagant lifestyle until authorities discovered he was actually running a $5 million illegal substances ring. To the outside world, Wimmer lived a life filled with glittering diamonds, flashy sports cars, a gold-plated Harley-Davidson, and front row seats to Sydney Harbor fireworks display. Wimmer often took to Instagram to share his life with his glamorous girlfriend and to post photos of his diamond-encrusted jewelry creation. While he was bragging on social media, Tasmanian police had partnered with New South Wales authorities and the Australian Federal Police's National Anti-Gang Squad to reveal the truth about Wimmer and how he got his money. And it wasn't from selling jewelry. Wimmer had been running his business from his Sydney home for 2 years, which involved smuggling large quantities of illegal substances into Tasmania by air, sea, and human couriers. Police executed search warrants where they seized 4 luxury vehicles, a motorcycle valued at $2 million, in cash. They released footage of them seizing and towing the vehicles from Wimmer's home. Wimmer was arrested and charged with trafficking offenses and was extradited from Australia to Tasmania. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section what you'd rather do. Have $1 billion but live for the next 25 years, or live your current lifestyle now forever.